Dr. Carolyn Royster, and I am going to go first. And so my piece is to speak a little bit about psychological well-being and technology use. And so we'll really dig into some of the research on that today, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some recommendations before we transition to Stacy, who's going to speak on some of the legal.
I'm not a doctor. Like Dr. Royster said, I will follow up. We have two sort of interrelated topics. I'm excited to hear what she has to say, and please have some questions, throw them out there for us, and let's have a fun couple hours here.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. So let's dive in. Okay, so very quickly, you guys know who I am. I already said that. I am a clinician. I work at Cornerstone Counseling in Waukesha. I work with a lot of kids, young children, middle school. That's kind of my specialty. And so I think that that's part of why they wanted me to come here today. This is something parents talk to me a lot about in my work, as well as a parent, I myself am thinking about and considering kind of all of the time. Okay? All right, we talked a little bit about what we're going to speak on tonight, so I won't belabor that point. I'm going to start with a little video introduction.
My name is Alejandra, and I'm 13. In the morning, I got my phone and I'll check my Instagram, Snapchat, Kik, Twitter, Tumblr, Vine. I get more excited than I should get. When I hear buzz, I'm like, oh, I have friends. I guess it would be addicting because you always have to be on it. My mom, she doesn't really have like rules, I guess. I hope she thinks I have it under control because I think I do.
Okay. So the quality didn't really pan out. We tested sound, but we didn't test the actual like streaming. But honestly, that's okay because it wasn't a super fascinating video. It just was about, this teenager talking through all of the things that she's checking every single day. And quite honestly, I had to look up what Kik was. I didn't know. So it was just a little bit of an interesting introduction to what we're talking about. So what I want to start with is just kind of prevalence on a national level, and then I'm not sure if y'all are aware, but they did do a survey of Merton students, and so we have some of those statistics to kind of supplement the national trends that I'm going to speak to you about. So largely this presentation focuses on middle childhood, so that's the tween range, that's 8 to 12. There's a lot of research on young children, and there's a lot of research on older teenagers. I'm not really sure why that is, but that's kind of the way the camps and where the funding goes. The reason that we are talking about both of those is that your kids are going to grow up into teenagers. So that's not that far away for you. So that research is pretty pertinent to what we're speaking about. Okay, so, and tweens are estimating that they're spending about 6 hours a day on technology in general. We have some kids at the far end of the extreme, about 6% are saying they're not spending any time on technology. I don't know that I believe that, but that might be the case. And then at the other end of the extreme, we have about 11% that are saying they're spending more than 8 hours a day. So I don't know how that works. If you're going to school, if you got home at 3:30, you would be spending until 11:30 on some sort of device. So that is happening. But the vast majority say that they're spending between like 2 to 6 hours-ish online. Okay? About 97% of kids say that they're spending at least an hour a day playing video games. That number increases as kids get older. So in late teenage years, that's about 99%. The kind of silver lining with that is that a good percentage of them, about 70%, are playing with other people. So at least there's that. It's not totally alone staring at a screen. Okay? What are they doing on technology? So Tweens largely like to watch TV. They're watching Netflix. That has been the case in past generations. It's the case kind of now as well. The second highest activity that kids like to do is listen to music. This flip-flops as kids get older. So as you move into more late adolescence, kids will say, I like to listen to music more and a little bit less of television. Watching online videos, using social media, that's all pretty high as well, okay? In terms of kiddos here, so Merton kids say that about 80% are watching videos. It's not, we didn't really differentiate between is that watching videos on YouTube, is that watching Netflix, it's just consuming content kind of passively in that way. Many of the kids that I work with are watching videos on YouTube, which is something that I'm like, I don't get this. Watching kids open toys online, like that's fun, apparently. So that's happening quite a bit. 50% are using social media, about 65% are gaming, and then communication kind of encompasses all these different things around, you know, texting or chatting or FaceTiming or Facebook messaging, all of that. Okay? When we think about technology consumption, it can be helpful, and we will talk a lot more about these kind of pieces, to think about them in terms of, is it passive or is it active? So passive consumption is where it's just kind of happening to you. You're not giving anything back, you're not participating, you're not engaging at all, you're just like in front of the screen, right? Or I kind of think of it as like the flipping through the phone. You're not posting, you're not gaming, that sort of stuff. So lots and lots of kids are doing that. About 37% are doing things like gaming, which is more interactive, and so in some ways there's some benefits to that. Only 3% are doing kind of creative endeavors online, which I think is really cool. Composing music and things like that is pretty awesome. So I'd like to see that go up. So given this information, I mean, parents are worried, and quite frankly, I can see why. There's a lot of kind of doomsday-ish research out there, and we will talk about some of that. And this is a lot of time, and this is a new kind of generational challenge that we're all working with. So I would say that you guys in here are obviously some of those parents that are trying to think about this a little bit more and be a little more thoughtful about it, and that's a good thing. So quite a few people, about 60% of parents are really worried about the effects of technology on their kids, and like 95% have tried to do something to respond to this. And we will talk a lot more about some specific strategies throughout this presentation. Okay? All right. So let's dig into it. We're going to speak a little bit here about psychological well-being and different facets of that, and we're going to go through a couple of them in this next portion. I love this quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy," because I think what a way to conceptualize social media in particular. So, dig in. Okay, the first thing that I really wanted to share with you guys is there was this fabulous study that just came out. It's gotten tons and tons and tons of press because it's awesome. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this to begin. So what we're looking at here is a really fancy kind of statistical graph. And across the bottom, you have years from 1991 all the way to 2016. Okay? They have studied kids and happiness and psychological well-being as cohorts across time, okay? So what you're looking at in the lines here is after about 2007, things start to dip a little bit, and then from 2012, there's a pretty drastic dip. So we're charting psychological well-being here, okay? Massive, massive study. So they studied over 1 million kids. They studied them at 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. Why did happiness and well-being drop so drastically after 2012? Why is that? What is this about? They had some theories. They have some thoughts about this. One thought was that we had the Great Recession around 2007, and that might be how, that's impacting this whole generation of kids. Another thought was technology use, so that's what they studied. 2007 was the introduction of smartphones. 2012 is kind of thought of as when the majority of Americans owned them and have them. So that's kind of our markers here. So they measured screen time, which was things like social media, internet, texting, gaming, and non-screen time, which is in-person interactions, sports, religious activities, even homework was included in that. And then they measured psychological well-being with different facets. So that's life satisfaction, happiness, and self-esteem. Okay? I bet you can guess where I'm going with this. So what they found was kids with more time on screens and less time in non-screen activities had significantly lower psychological well-being. This is a very robust finding, which in research terms means it's good research. It was well-founded. There's no confounding factors, okay? They were less happy, less satisfied with their lives, and had poorer self-esteem. And what's so striking about this is that it was more true for younger kids than it was for older kids. So as kids kind of grow up, they sort of figure out the balance, is my sort of thought on this, and adjust a little bit better, okay? So what are you looking at here? This side, kind of the middle is right here. This is all positive correlations, and this side is negative correlations. So not happy over there, happy over here. Notice that all of the positive ones are non-screen activities. Even homework, you guys, is in there. Homework is more happiness than, video chatting and texting and TV. So this is crazy. This is amazing and pretty profound. So if we kind of dive into a little bit more specific about this, this is what we're going to do, okay? That didn't make any sense, but what I'm trying to say is we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about other mental health pieces. Okay, so more time on social media has been linked with more symptoms of things like depression. Depression in teens as a cohort is on the rise when you compare it to other cohorts or generations. That's what I mean by cohort. So they kind of already are more likely to be depressed, and there's a lot of theories about why that is, but that's important to know when we're talking about this research, that there's already a little bit of that there. And then also you add on this technology piece and you might see more depressive symptoms, okay? Kids who spend more time on screen times are about 13%. It's not a huge effect, but about 13% more likely to show depressive symptoms. There is some research that's linked smartphone use to suicide rates. This is a really scary point to make, and this is a scary point for me to kind of talk to you guys about. But how I want you to think about it is that it's a risk factor. It's not the only factor. It's not like, oh, you're on social media a lot, therefore you're more likely to commit suicide. That's not the case. It's that among all these other factors that might raise your risk for something like that, social media kind of increases that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good. In regards to anxiety, there's also been a good deal of research that's linked media use in general to higher levels of anxiety. It doesn't take too many jumps to figure out how that might be. We will talk a little bit more specifically about anxiety in particular. But what happens is that kids start to get this perceived social isolation. It may not be the case. This is about perception. So this is the feeling of being in a crowded room and still feeling very lonely and still feeling very alone, which when I think about social media, isn't that part of the issue, right? Like it's so much connection and yet you still feel so alone in what you're experiencing. And so it has really been strongly linked to that feeling of isolation. Okay? The piece with talking about mental health symptoms is that it's not causational. So we don't know for sure if more media use causes these symptoms, so causes you to have depressed symptoms, or if kids that already feel sort of depressed and anxious gravitate towards media use. So it's not totally clear, and what's likely the case is that it's a little bit of both. That if you kind of already are, flavored that way, that you tend to gravitate toward these things that then tend to exacerbate the symptoms, and vice versa. Okay? All right, I think that's all. There is also, as a cohort, there's kind of a thought that this generation is more narcissistic. Narcissistic is kind of an inflated sense of who you are and less empathic. But we'll kind of debunk that one a little bit in a little while. Okay. Generally, on social media, people want to present themselves well. That makes sense, right? You're not showing the rough day that you had, or the bad grade you got, or these kind of more negative views of yourself. It's just pretty universal that people most of the time are posting very positive things about themselves. So really focusing on all of these idealized images of other people can lead to some outcomes like poor self-esteem or increased symptoms of depression and anxiety. There is a really interesting kind of finding that if you are looking at all these positive things about people and you have more close friends versus acquaintances on your feed, that effect is lessened a little bit. Because if you're looking at a close friend's accomplishments, one, you might know that all that glitters is not gold, right? And we kind of know this from our own experiences with social media. And two, you might feel, what we know from research is that you might feel a sense of ownership. Like, yeah, they accomplished this great thing, but I kind of helped with that, or I maybe taught this person a different way to think about the math problem that then got them a great grade in math, whatever it is that someone's bragging about, okay? So close friends versus acquaintances is important. So quality over quantity in terms of followers, etc. Okay? The other thing that happens when people are comparing themselves to other people is that they start to think that they're alone in their negative experiences. I'm the only one that's feeling this way. No one else is experiencing these kind of negative things. Okay? All right. Impact on relationships. So use of screens for communicating socially is associated with more peer aggression, more relational anxiety, so that's things like cyberbullying, and sometimes a little bit of like avoidance around social connection, not really wanting to engage with people. What we know is that media use doesn't really impact our kids' ability to develop relationships, but it seems to be impacting the quality of the relationship. And that makes sense, right? Like it's super easy to connect with people online. You can easily find, other people that have similar interests, but it's that quality of relationship that seems to be suffering. Okay? Kids, when you ask them, will say that they still prefer to interact with their friends face-to-face, which I find very heartening. That's a little encouraging, I guess. And some will say, and I'm not surprised by this finding, that it helps their peer interactions as well. And that makes sense because I feel like kids have kind of grown up with this and they're kind of attached to it, and this is how they think that they are really connecting with their peers. Okay. In terms of screens and health, so you might kind of wonder why I would put something in here about physical health. And the reason is, I'm not a doctor, I don't have training in a medical way at all. But as a clinician, the mind and your health is connected. And especially with younger kids, that can often be the case. So it's very common for a younger child, they won't come in and say to me like, I feel very sad today and I'm very down. They will say, I don't want to go to school, I have a stomach ache. So it kind of presents a different way. So there are some really important health implications of technology use, so we'll talk about those. More social media and technology use has been linked to more illness, more sick days, things like stomach aches, headaches, that kind of stuff. There's been some really interesting research on the number of texts that people send, that kids send, and sleep problems. Sleep's kind of an important thing for our kids, and school performance and all kinds of other outcomes. This last little bit of research on this page is so interesting because this study only studied technology in kids' bedrooms. Not even if they were using it, they didn't even bother to ask that question. It was simply, do you have a TV? Do you have a gaming console in your bedroom? Okay? So that's kind of intense. And what they found was that kids that had bedroom media, so it's in that space, have increased risk for obesity, increased risk for things like video game addiction. We'll talk about that word, addiction, in a little bit. They usually are exposed to more violent content. We'll also talk about that. And they're displacing important activities. So they're not sleeping because they're staying up and playing games, or they're staying up and texting, or they're going to bed a lot later than they typically would. So sleep is pushed back. Okay? So a lot of important stuff. All right. One of the outcomes of poor sleep is that it starts to impact school performance. The other thing that's happening in terms of school performance is a lot of multitasking. This study is so fascinating. I think it's fascinating. And it's also, I'll just own the fact that I'm doing this research and I'm typing this slide out, and I have like Pandora going in the background, and my cell phone's right there. So I'm not above this myself. Like, I multitask all the time. We all do, right? So they watched kids, they watched middle schoolers and high schoolers in this study, and they watched them for 15-minute increments. And kids could go on average 6 minutes before they stopped what they were doing and checked something else. So what are they doing? Some are watching TV, some are checking social media, some are texting, I myself am very guilty of. So that's average 6 minutes. So that means sometimes it's way less than that. And the interesting thing about when you study people is that they perform better. So if I know that I'm being observed, I will do whatever it is less. So we have reason to think that this is actually much more intense than every 6 minutes. The other thing that's so fascinating about this is when the researchers talked to the kids, they said, well, yeah, of course I did. It totally helps me. When I'm multitasking, I'm like way more productive, which they're definitely not. It's just not the case. Kids that do this more have poorer grades, more sickness, so lots of issues with being able to actually focus on something. Again, I mean, I think it's something that a lot of us struggle with in today's world. But these researchers seem to even think that listening to music in the background wasn't itself very distracting. So I don't know about that. Okay, so this is all bad, and we should take away every bit of technology that children have, put them all in that 6% that get no screen time at all, right? Absolutely. That's what we should do. Just kidding. So there are some benefits to technology use. That big, huge study that I kind of flooded you guys with in the beginning that collected all this data found that there's kind of this sweet spot for kids, and that's between 1 and 5 hours a week. So it comes out to about an hour a day during the week. Those kids were the happiest overall, like over the kids that had none, and over the kids that had like 20 hours a week on technology, okay? So the reason for that is that these kids feel sort of connected, they feel plugged into their peers, they don't feel like they're missing out, and also they're not getting kind of bombarded with all of these negative effects, okay? The other piece is that there is something to be said, and there is some research that suggests that kids are learning empathy through some of these online interactions. They're developing the ability to take other people's perspectives. They're thinking about their actions in a different way. So it's not all bad, okay? The other piece is that if you work really hard for something, and if you are really proud of it, and you post about it, and you get a lot of support from people you care about, that can feel good, right? And we don't want too much of that, but some of that is okay, right? It helps kind of build up some self-esteem and self-identity, right? Okay. These are issues that I thought were important, that I wanted to talk to you about, but I did not want to keep you here for 3 hours because they're just so huge. And this topic, you guys, is just enormous. We could not fit it all in if you gave me, like, you know, a whole course to teach this on. I get real on a soapbox about body image and gender socialization and the images that our kids are seeing of what is attractive, of what is acceptable, of what it means to be a male, what it means to be a female. So that there is substantial research about exposure to these things on technology and how that's impacting our kids. The little short note, it's not great. That's the takeaway of that, okay? Cyberbullying is an issue. It's an issue in schools. It occurs at slightly less frequencies online as it does in person, which I was a little surprised about. It's about 19% online, 20-ish% in person. Kids will say that. I think in general, our issues with bullying research is that it's vastly underreported. And what levels it rises to are kind of varied. There is some really great resources around what to do with cyberbullying. We just don't have the time to touch on that. The other very, very hot topic right now is about viewing aggressive content and viewing violent content, particularly playing violent video games, first-person shooter games, watching really violent, gory, awful movies. Obviously, this is a huge issue in our nation right now, but we don't have time to go into all of it because it's just an enormous thing. However, this is what I will say. There is substantial research that links viewing violent content to greater risk for violent outcomes. However, some of that research has been challenged. I wouldn't say debunked because it hasn't been, but challenged on some of like the methodological grounds. Some of it tells us things that aren't super clear, like viewing violent video games makes you more likely to have violent thoughts. Well, okay, but does violent thoughts mean you act on those thoughts? Or do you think the thought and then that's gone, and so you're less likely? So it gets really kind of into this gray area. How we as a field think about this now is that viewing violent content, playing games like that, is a risk factor. So if you already have some other risk factors that raise your risk of acting in an aggressive or violent way, adding on first-person shooter games, adding on mature content is not going to help you to be less, right? So there are a lot of factors that go into someone's capability or ability to act in an aggressive and violent way, and this is one of them, okay? There's also some interesting, I mean, this is exciting stuff for me as a psychologist, but I mean, maybe not for everybody, but there is some interesting things about the benefits of some of those games, even first-person shooter games. So the kind of bigger findings are that it helps kids with visual spatial planning. It helps them to think ahead about their actions. And so that's really kind of controversial. People don't love to hear that. But it's there. And so that's why we don't have time to go into this in such a big way, because there's a lot of split research in a lot of different ways. Okay? All right. That's a video that we don't really have time to. So, how and why does this happen? Why are we so interested? And I say we because it's not just our kids. You know, why are we so interested and susceptible to some of these effects. So there are some things we know. In terms of simple kind of behaviorism, think about like a slot machine, right? You don't know when you're going to get the big payout. And so you're really tempted to just pull it one more time, right? So if we knew every day that Instagram was going to update at 3 o'clock, then we wouldn't check it all day long, right? We check it at 3:05. But we don't know when we're going to get that payout. So we're checking it all the time, okay? Apps are designed to be behaviorally reinforcing, to make us want to keep coming back for more. Some of the really big tech companies, Apple, Facebook, they've come out recently, which is not news, but it kind of is news, that they designed their products to be addicting. Well, duh. I mean, we all, like, of course they did. They want to make a lot of money, and they did. So they're designed to be that way, and they're designed very well to be that way, and they are. Okay? There's also neurobiologically, there's a lot of mechanisms going on. But when you get something that is rewarding to you, so whatever that might be, a compliment, a kiss from your partner, a notification, a like, you get a little dopamine rush in your brain. And dopamine is our pleasure hormone. So I like things, I get dopamine. Like that's kind of what it is, right? And so when you're getting pleasure from doing some of these things, your brain is changing in a way that reinforces that over time. There's some interesting kind of neurobiological stuff that happens that there's some camps, I should say, that just anticipating a reward, so just thinking about how many likes do I have, is twice as rewarding in terms of the dopamine levels as actually getting that reward. So just the anticipation is enough to kind of get your brain sort of hooked. Okay? The other thing that's happening is that adolescent brains are crazy town. There's so much going on at once. It's an enormous time of expansion in brain development. Their little frontal lobes, so that's kind of this part of your brain, is in charge of what we call executive functioning. Executive functioning is the things that help you make good decisions, have insight into your choices, judgment, planning, thinking ahead, delayed gratification. So this is already a time in our kids' lives that is forming and not formed. It's not there yet. That's the part of adolescence that's happening. And so when you design this technology to kind of, prey on that, you have kind of a recipe for it to be very addictive. Okay? So I'm not going to speak too much about identity development because we've kind of talked about that already, but there's also some effects that are well researched that we know about. Online disinhibition is the sort of ability to forget who you are online and say things that you wouldn't normally say. You kind of feel safe behind your screen, if that makes sense. We've all seen this. We've all done this, right? The other piece is emotional contagion, and I think this is very interesting when you think about anxiety symptoms and think about depression symptoms. It's so intuitive, it almost feels silly to talk about, but this is when you watch something that's sad, you feel sad. When you watch something that's violent, those parts of your brains are a little bit triggered. Okay? So this slide is about how we get to that place of seeing some of those symptoms. Okay? All right. I get asked about this a lot, and so I just want to touch briefly on the thoughts around addiction and kind of gaming disorders and things like that. So there's a lot of debate around this word internet addiction, this phrase internet addiction. Parents and kids are talking about feeling addicted, and the sort of casual meaning of that word versus the medical meaning of that word are different things. And so as a professional, when I think about addiction, there's kind of criteria in my head for what that is and what that looks like. And we can't agree as a field on whether this is a thing. And we can't agree really if and what that would look like. And it gets very messy when we think about how kids have to use technology. You know, you have to use it in school. You have to use it to research. It's a part of our kids' kind of culture. And so it's hard to quantify like how much is too much and how much is too little, and you know, what does it look like when they use nothing at all. So we don't really like to use that language. There is some thinking around internet gaming disorder. That's kind of becoming the trend that people are using, which is mostly about understanding how is this impacting kids' functioning? How is it impacting their relationships? Are they having negative consequences, like poor grades at school, or not getting along with their peers, not getting along with their parents? So that is, I think, where the field is kind of moving towards in terms of thinking about how do we have language for when this is a real problem, okay? The interesting piece about internet gaming disorder is they are starting to see, throwing back to some of our neurobiology lessons, they are starting to see that the brains of kids that are doing really excessive gaming is looking a lot like people that have gambling disorders, is looking a lot like people that have substance use disorders, which changes the biology of your brain. And so we're starting to see that like that is really happening, okay? More how we talk about it is problematic media use, which is not any, fascinating word. It's basically what it is. This is causing problems for you in multiple areas of your life, and we are concerned about it. So that's the language we kind of use. Okay? All right. In the last couple minutes here, we're just going to speak about boundaries, limits, rules. Because it's not, I didn't think it was altogether helpful to just tell you about how bad this is. Especially when there is a lot of really good support and strategies out there in the psychological community about kind of research-based things that we can do. Okay? So the first thing that I wanted to say to you guys is that knowing the research, being informed on what's going on, being informed on what research is telling us around ways to limit this, around healthy use, what that looks like, what that doesn't look like. I love, and we'll talk about some of these resources, but I use Common Sense Media has so much great stuff on it. It's like a rabbit hole. You just go down it, and speaking of, being healthy with your technology use, you could spend so much time on there. But what's great about it is that you can sign up for like newsletters that you get that are specific to your worries. So if you're really worried about young children and gaming, you can kind of get information just on that. Or older teenagers and social media use. So that's a fabulous resource. It's nonpartisan as far as I could tell. I didn't dig too far into that, but it doesn't seem to be funded by anybody, which is kind of important. And we'll talk about some other ones as well. So it's important, and Stacy's going to talk more about some of these legal issues and safety issues, but it's really important to teach kids who to talk to when things don't go well, when they feel like it's too much, when they get in a situation they don't know how to get out of, when they're being cyberbullied, and to be very explicit about this. We cannot just assume that our kids know to talk to you, or to talk to someone at the school, or to talk to a counselor, whoever it might be that they've identified in their environment. Okay? The piece that I want to say about knowing your kids is that knowing this research, knowing the pieces that I have already presented on, if you know that your kiddo is a little bit more of like an anxious-oriented soul, then you might want to be thinking about how much time am I letting them be on social media. Does that make sense? You know your child. So if your intuition is like, I don't think they should be doing so much gaming, listen to that. You know your kids. You know the research. You're paying attention. That's important. Okay? Active content generally is better than this passive consumption. So if you can be talking to them around commenting, posting, being on sites that they have a passion for, being thoughtful in what they're looking at instead of just like whatever comes across my feed, I take in. Okay? And again, Stacy and I will talk a lot. Stacy will talk a little bit more about this, but the important takeaway I want you to think about here is to be very, very explicit. Do not assume that they know these things. They're kids, and we have to teach them all kinds of things, right? And so I would see some of the, when I was researching to add to this presentation, you know, I would see articles about like how to talk to your kids about how to text. Like, it's sort of a silly concept if you think about it, but how would you know I don't need to respond to this right away unless someone's showing you that, telling you that? Like, we learn these lessons by being talked to by our parents. Okay? So very explicit rules around, you know, cyberbullying, be kind, that sort of thing, sexting, language, privacy. So my husband's in IT, and he wants me to be very clear that kids share passwords a lot. Our kids here at Merton, it's about 18%, I think is what it was, say that they are sharing things that they shouldn't share online. So we're talking about things like addresses, passwords. Passwords to Netflix is like a really big thing. Passwords to Hulu, that sort of thing. But guess what Netflix has? Your credit card, your home address, like all this information that if that gets out there is pretty concerning, right? So be explicit about it. How would they know they're not supposed to do that if we're not telling them? Okay? Also, his little PSA is like, don't set your passwords be like password 1. Tell me that all the time. Okay. Tech breaks are a really common thing, and I think they're a really great strategy. This is about limiting technology in certain settings, certain situations. A very common one is the dinner table. If you'll recall the health slide, I think it's a fabulous recommendation to not have technology in the bedroom. I think a lot of our kids sleep with the phone plugged in, and it's our alarm clock. Well, we can do some things about that. We can buy them an alarm clock. We're like an old-fashioned one with numbers. You know? It helps. And you know, it's really kind of tricky. I have a friend that does like tech-free Tuesdays. I know she's not great about it all the time, but I love that idea. I think that's a great, you know, from the time they get home until they go to bed, they don't use technology. That's great. There is some research that says when we do this, so when we limit it for our kids, that they feel an overwhelming sense of relief. Because it's not about them feeling like they're missing something, it's that we've taken that kind of control away, and it's like, okay, we're off limits right now. So they have kind of a sense of relief. It's like vacation, you know, like everybody knows I'm not going to respond on vacation, so I don't feel this pressure to like check my email. Okay? And we talked a little bit about protecting. Okay. Turning off notifications is really important and really big because of what we were talking about with the slot machine problem. If it's there, you're going to want to check it. If you hear it, if you feel it, and I do mean not vibrations as well, because that's just as distracting. I don't know who thought that up, but of course, like, I know your phone's ringing, it's vibrating here. Turning off autoplay. So this is really interesting. I myself, I think we've all probably been guilty of this. Netflix, the show stops, and it just plays another one. And what do you know? 2 hours have gone by, and I've watched an entire season of Parks and Rec. So, I mean, turning off autoplay is I think it's a really great, simple solution. So you have to be more thoughtful about when you're going to watch another episode or whatever it is. Same with YouTube. Rian Johnson, he directed Star Wars, for this funny little tweet about how to turn off autoplay. I have no idea how to do it, but I think it's a great idea. The other piece I wanted to talk about is there were some interesting recommendations, I thought, around in-app purchases. So games like Candy Crush and Farmville, where you pay $1 and then you can keep going, or you pay 50 cents, is a really good way to blow 50 bucks. And so some people were saying, like, just buy the game outright, and you won't have to worry about this kind of, give us a little bit more money, and you can keep playing. So I don't know how I feel about that one, but it's good. Okay, this is a really important study, one of the last kind of global recommendations that I want to make for you guys. So this study asked kids about rules around technology. And they found that kids do better with rules when they feel like they are part of creating them, okay? When they understand where they're coming from. So if they get kind of a say in it, they feel more able to follow the expectations. Rules kind of fall into these two categories, context and activity. So activity is things like, don't give out our home address, Johnny. I get to look at your phone whenever I want. That's the parent access piece. Context is things like, let's not use phones at the dinner table. Please don't use your phone in your bedroom, right? So what they found, and this was a little bit surprising to me, is that kids have a much higher likelihood of following the expectations if they are more activity-centered than context-centered, right? So context is harder because there's a lot more gray area. So do you see the difference that it seems to be easier for kids to follow a rule around privacy, like we don't give out our credit card information, we don't give out our password to anybody, as opposed to we don't have phones at the dinner table. The reason for that is that it's very easy for parents and for kids to justify breaking the contextual rules. So it's easy to be like, oh, but I have this one thing, or I'm on call tonight, or so-and-so called me, and it's a big issue. Right? So it's an interesting finding when you're thinking about setting rules and expectations. Okay, so modeling and what you guys do is really important. This is the time when you start to squirm in your seats. It's not a one-way street, and we all have relationships with technology too that we need to be paying attention to. And believe you me, doing this, I was like, oh boy, I need to look at some of my tech habits here. You know, it's very normal. 27% of parents say that they themselves are feeling addicted to their devices. And lo and behold, about 28% of kids say, yeah, you are. You are. I see you, Mom and Dad, right? So when asked who's likely to break the rules, about 30% of teens say their parents are the ones that are going to break the rules. They're the ones. And about 36, so a little bit higher, of teens will say, no, I'm the one that breaks the rules. And then there's a 15% in there that are like, nah, it's a toss-up. We're both not so good at this, okay? So they're on to something. Kids' perspectives on media use. So they notice when you're distracted. They notice when you're not present. What they want, if research could tell us what a child would say to us up here, is they would say, please be present with me. It's important not to have your phone out when I'm trying to have an important conversation with you. And this feels like we shouldn't have to say it, but we do. Kids are feeling the need to say it. They want autonomy. It's kind of opposite of what I'm telling you with this presentation. They don't really get that too much. They want kind of you to help them moderate their use. They're okay with being supervised. Generally, most of them are like, yeah, I get it. My parents need to kind of check in. This is a privilege, it's not a right, that sort of stuff. They would love, and this came up a lot, for you not to use technology while you're driving. Not even at stop signs, is what it says. Like, none at all. To follow the rules that you're setting. And then this last one is something that came up over and over and over again. And I was very surprised by this, you guys. Kids don't love it when we share their pictures and share their information without their permission. It bugs them, and I get it. When you really think about it, it does make sense. And so that's, a little piece for you to chew on. Okay? It's really important to practice balance ourselves. We are not perfect, but if we're expecting this of them in a lot of ways, I think it's important to try to do it yourself. That's the most powerful thing you can do for your kids. So carving out time for face-to-face interaction, being very careful with multitasking yourself. I'll just, hide in a corner over here. Consuming high-quality content yourself, being really thoughtful about what you're doing, tech-free time. And then this last point on this slide is so poignant to me as a clinician, because we are not perfect. And so being able to model with your kids around, I really wish I hadn't taken that call when we were talking, or I really am bummed out that I just spent 3 hours online and I didn't plan to do that, or whatever it might be. So that's so powerful for kids when you can model how to handle it when you mess up. Does that make sense? What to watch for. So like anything, you're watching for sort of, the kind of extreme. So using media to really isolate oneself, using it to kind of withdraw, like this is a kid that's on their phone instead of talking to all their friends. Really high distractibility, risky behavior, things like that. Worsening symptoms of mental health. So if you're seeing like, gosh, the more time that Johnny spends playing the game, the more irritable he is after. Like, these are things to pay attention to. Okay. Oops. Oh gosh, that video is so funny, but we don't have time for it. And I don't know that it'll play totally right. So, okay, here's some really good resources for you guys. Common Sense Media, fabulous. People know them a lot because they will do parent ratings of like movies and video games. So that seems to be what they're highly publicized for. But they have awesome, awesome resources for any and all of these questions that you might have. APA is my sort of wheelhouse. They have some really great resources on technology and mental health. Kind of, it's a great place for the newest research. So that's a good area for that too. Okay, Jean Twenge. I have not read this book, full disclosure. This is the person that has done massive amounts of research on media and technology use in this generation of kids. So I've not read this book, I've read a lot of her research. It's fabulous. So I'm inclined to believe the book is pretty good if you're pretty interested in this sort of topic. She is one of the head researchers on that big study we talked about at the beginning. Oh, that's what I mentioned. Okay, apps. I just did a quick kind of search. I don't use these, I probably should. But I did a quick search around apps that can help to sort of take some of this control back for you, and some of these are really great. I looked into some of them. Some are more intense. They like lock your phone and there's no way to get it open, or, like these crazy things. But some are more like, hey, put your phone down. So that's another thing. And then finally, I put Cornerstone's number because we're a big agency and I'm here kind of on behalf of them. So should you ever feel like, gosh, this is really getting outside of us, that might be the time to talk to somebody about some of this stuff. So we are there as a resource as well. So I have only just a couple minutes for questions before Stacy comes up, and I don't know if you wanted to start kind of getting set up while we do questions, Stacy, or whatever, but
you can text me and ask me to do it.
Yeah, I'll text you from here.
I understand what you're doing.
Yeah, so, okay, any really big burning questions? Yes?
I'm just curious, in the scheme of all the testing of how much time, are they counting the time that they're on there? I mean, if all the kids have to have Chromebooks, is that included in that time? Because those early signs?
No, I don't think so. Some of the research does count it, but most does not. So like 8 hours a day, how is that even happening? And then you add the time in school where you're required to be on it. How, right?
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. But that's where it gets into some of the tricky issues, is like kids need Chromebooks and need internet to do some of what they're required to do. So, yeah.
At what age are kids, they start becoming capable of handling computers? We have noticed, we had a problem with our daughter with emailing during class. She's in class, she has a Chromebook. Emails come through because her friends are in study hall. At what age are they capable of managing that on their own, because I know there's times where I can be working and I get an email.
Yeah, me too, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
so what age are they usually?
You know, I don't think that it's a clear answer. I think it kind of depends on kids. But if I answered it in terms of biology, I mean, it's late teenage that your executive functioning is kind of coming on board, where you can not eat. You guys have seen the marshmallow test, like the little marshmallows in front of them, and the kid like cannot not eat marshmallow. Like they can't. That's the story of it. It's a very funny YouTube clip. You know, if you want to waste some time. But that's delayed gratification is the ability to wait for what you want, right? And so that develops more as you age. So on the other hand, we need to start kind of strengthening that muscle early on. So I think small steps earlier is probably, I know that's not a really great answer to that in terms of an age, but yeah, I think we'll do the last one, and then if you have other questions, Stacy and I can answer them at the end. Yeah.
I just saw an ad for, I think it was called a circle. And it's supposed to be, because I know I battle with, my kids get home at 2:45, and I'm usually not getting home until 5:30. So you've got that time period where, they've got more free time on their hands, and it's hard to necessarily see what they're all doing. And I know I can be more disciplined about really setting, and I've tried at different times, and then it falls apart of like, they do it from this time to this time or whatever. But this is something that you can use on your phone. I think you can set time limits on certain.
We have Circle. It's
You have
exactly
that?
that. Like, he could be at work, and I'll call him and be like, you need to unpause it, because none of us can use the internet. You put it on pause. But
It's a Disney My Circle. It actually is an app that runs your router. And so we struggled with it for years, and now we found this. And it basically is if your kid has 1 hour per day, and if they fill their hour in the first hour of their home, it locks it off. You can control YouTube, everything.
I thought it sounded really cool, but
and it gives reward, like, oh my gosh, they did all their homework all week without any complaints. I'm going to give them an extra half hour on the weekend. You could set that up too, like the rewards.
So you can see what they're going on. I mean,
It records everything.
So you would say if
We did have to buy another router, which cost us $240, but for their safety.
Yeah. There's some really cool stuff. That's a great idea. There's also some, like, I think sort of intense, like Norton, who makes the malware virus stuff. They have these, like, security things that you can put on your phones, and they have really poor reviews, and they're very, like, invasive and sort of like, I don't know what else word to say besides that. Just sort of. That's my professional doctoral language there. Yeah, and I think it's always about the relationship with your kids, right? And so being able to connect about why you're doing what you're doing and what you're teaching about why this behavior is important and how do we help you get there. Does that make sense? So I like something that's a little more like, okay, we're going to let you. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy and, cruise Instagram in the back. And we'll have time to answer some more questions at the end if you have them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody be happy. Everybody walks out. They're like, okay, let's hear from the doctor.
All right, stand up for a sec. Let's just stand up. Stand up. Woo! Deep breath, shake it out. We've been sitting for about an hour. I'm actually recovering from a broken ankle, so I was sitting in the back, and then I stood up and like, oh yeah, it's the right foot. So this is my way of being able to walk around as well. So shake it out, have a seat. This hour's going to go pretty quickly. Who has seen me? Now we got to sit in order for you to raise a hand, otherwise I can't see the hand. Who has seen me in the past? Who's been pulled over by me in the So a couple of hands have gone up. Was that at Parents United?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the very similar presentation, so bear with me. There's a couple of things in here that I don't want you to give the punchline away to. You got it? So that's the main reason. My name is Stacy Steen. I was invited here today to partner up with Dr. Royster regarding social media, smartphones. What can we do? What are the problems? I'd love to be able to go around the room and ask why each of you are here. Like something brought you here today, Lincoln Navigator, Lexus, but some reason you're here on a Tuesday night. Excellent, that's cool. She didn't get to the distracting part, so it's okay. They invited me here. The Merton School District saw my presentation at Parents United, and they asked me to come out here. So what I really want to do is make sure this is geared towards something that you are here for. Okay, so if you have questions, please throw your hand up in the air, text me. The number's on the presentation. And if you want to text me later or tomorrow, and I'll answer your question. I'll do the best that I can for you, okay? So, let's see if I hear it. Hello. Let's push the button until it goes green. Oh, don't do this to me. Hey, tech guy, my IT guy. All right. So here's the deal. We're going to go through this quickly, because this is usually a lot longer of a presentation. We're going to talk about social media. Not much, though, because the doctor really touched on a lot of it. Talk about generational differences. Stats on phone use. We're going to breeze through that because she did a really good job covering the Merton School District. They did a survey of your kids. And the kids, we hope, are honest when they answered the survey. But they're absolute angels. So let's just hope they were honest, because they're angels. We're going to look at some criminal statutes, recognize some criminal behaviors, and then talk about some resources and strategies that you can use. And apparently I'm just going to hold on to this as a pacifier. Why are you going to listen to me? Here we go. I spent almost 26 years in the Milwaukee Police Department. I retired April of 2017. The last 5 years of my career I spent at the Milwaukee Police Academy training recruits. So about 2/3 of Milwaukee Police Department, whatever they've done to you, either good or bad, is probably partially my fault. I really enjoyed doing that. Throughout my career, and don't look at my bangs, I don't even know. I was like, I should take that out. And I'm like, nah, why not? Part of my career, I dealt a lot with arresting people on felonies. I was on what's called a fugitive apprehension unit. Now we have a new chief, and that's defunct. So apparently there's no more felons in Milwaukee, so property taxes just went up. But I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of juveniles. Juveniles that got into trouble literally by making a dumb decision. Just a bonehead move. How many of us, in our adolescence, we'll do a survey of later in their 20s and 30s later, but how many of us when we were teenagers just did something dumb? Put your hand, come, let's be honest, Merton. Okay? And your heart was in the right place, but you just didn't make the right choice that particular day. Okay? I had the opportunity to not be the parent of those kids, but be the police officer. Sitting in front of them, trying to figure out, what are we going to do with you? What motivated your decision to do whatever brought you to me today? And I really got a lot of feedback from these juveniles, from these kids. And they were honest with me, because I already knew the truth. It's like when you talk to your kids. You already know, you just want to know if they're going to be straightforward, right? So I really got interested in the topics of the day, meaning, what are kids getting in trouble for? Why do we need this? How many of you got great kids, don't you? And your kids have great parents, obviously, because you're sitting in this room. And right now, except for this family that left because they forgot to put their circle thing on. Oh, there they are. They're up there. They're getting better reception up there. You're hoping that your kids aren't sitting on the computers and gaming and doing all this, talking to a dude that lives in Ireland and we're killing things on those machines, right? You're good parents. You're concerned with the welfare of your kids. They do their homework. They keep their rooms clean. These are great kids, right? So great kids don't do bad things. How many would agree? How many of you are absolutely great adults and great parents that at one time in your life did something dumb? Yeah, huh? Right? So, I really wish I had my clicker. So just read through these quick. And like I said, I have to do this pretty fast. But even the parent-teacher conferences, right? You got great kids. They do all their homework. They're polite. They're kind, right? The biggest feedback my mother got, I'm an only child, I was petrified to do anything because it was the only child. And my feedback always from my teachers was, show growth and self-control. And I never knew what that meant, neither did my mother, so that was actually a really good thing. When the doctor was talking about equating internet addiction with, say, slot machines, fast forward now, I turned 21, my mother takes me to Vegas. This is quite a number of years ago, like 8. And we're dropping money in these machines, and now they're coins actually, so now I'm dating myself. We're pulling these handles and pulling these handles, and almost simultaneously we looked at each other and said, show growth and self-control. I get it, okay? What the doctor was talking about with brain development in our adolescents and younger, they don't have that self-control yet. They don't even know what it felt like to have self-control. They can't recall it when they're starting to make decisions. So, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Technology has changed. How many of you heard, you'll understand when you're older? You remember that? Hey mom, what's this? You'll understand when you're older. And all that meant is, oh crap, I gotta go to the library and look it up because they're gonna ask me soon, right? Nowadays, can you say that to your kid? No. What if you say to your kid, you know what? We'll have that conversation in 2 years. What is your kid gonna do? They're gonna ask Siri or Alexa or all these chicks, they know all these things, right? And these kids are going to get the information, right? And we're going to do this real quickly. If I have information that I'm not supposed to really be able to absorb and understand until I'm older, but I have it in my hands, and my brain doesn't know how to connect with the decision making, where does it fit? That kid all of a sudden is armed with something that they can't handle. Is that fair enough? Right? And that's when we all of a sudden see these mistakes happening at younger ages. What you doing? You got one?
Try the down arrow.
I love millennials. No? All right. Give her a hand, please. Helping out the Xer. All right. So before we had all of this social media and this technology and this texting and this retina identification and these fingerprints for all this kind of stuff, how did you communicate with each other? Who got caught notes? Throwing notes, right? And all of a sudden you see the note going down the line, you're like, no, no, no! And you freak out, and then you're like, WB. What's that mean? Right back. And you actually are right. I don't think we need thumbs anymore. It's not even, we don't need thumbs. So nothing has changed. Kids are still communicating with each other. Kids are still having the exact same conversations. They're just doing it differently. And then words are illuminated in blue that they shouldn't understand. And what do? Click on it. And now you get everything at your fingertips. I know some of you are nodding like, yep, I get it. So, taking that trip down the memory lane, there's my number up there, 840-3961. I tried to get it permanently changed to 867-5309. Somebody already has it. Text me with your questions. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There's a learning curve. All right, let's see if this will play. Ooh. What do you think, for bonus points? Let's see. Is it possible? Says, how do you get your hair to smell so beautiful? Bear with me. Ooh, not play. Ooh, hold on. This is being recorded, so just, edit that. All right, I'll just walk away from the podium. So nowadays, we communicate we don't go face to face, right? How many of you have a phone and you actually forgot that phone was a feature? It's not really a phone, it's a camera. It's not really a phone, it's your calendar, right? It's all these different things. And when the phone rings, how many of you are like, oh, let's be good. Is it green or is it red? It just happened to me twice in the back. Oh, just text me. You're fine, right? I'm obviously over the age of a millennial. I grew up in a household that I had to be face-to-face with people. I had to communicate. I got hired in the Milwaukee Police Department in 1992. I was raised by a single Jewish mother. When I was 37, she finally said to me, I can't believe you've been making your own dentist appointments for the last 17 years. Yeah, Mom. Okay? I didn't do a lot for myself because my mother did most everything for me. But we didn't have technology back then. When I got in the police department, they forced me to talk to people. They forced me to get into situations, critically think my way through, and hopefully not use force on somebody. Do you think it takes time to learn those skills? Yeah, younger coppers, woo! I train them now. I work out at MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College, part-time. I train their recruits. What I'm seeing with them, and I'll try to make this connected to something that the doctor was talking about, these kids come in and they can troubleshoot for me. They'll say, press F4. F2. And I even look at them, I go, if you already know what I should be doing and I'm struggling and you're just sitting there waiting for me to ask you for help, ooh. Okay? They're really great with that. They're really great problem solvers in front of things, not in front of people. How many of you noticed that in the past 5 years or so, or it seems like the perception is that the use of force has gone up with police officers versus citizens? Or at least the media has really latched onto that, okay? What I'm finding, and this is my own case study, just by being alive and doing what I'm doing, I find that if you say to a brand new police recruit, can you stand up for me, sir? I'll be the police recruit and you be the not police recruit. And what's your first name, sir? Mark. Hi, Mark. Thank you for doing this, forcing you. Mark has, I need to take him into custody. I'm a brand new police recruit. I'm 21 years old. I've only interacted with my phone and my computer and my virtual reality friends. Sir, I'm a police officer and I have the lawful legal authority to make the arrest, sir. Do you understand that?
Yes.
I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Say, no, why?
No, why?
Sir, you need to turn around and put your hands behind your back.
No.
Sirree? Have a seat, thank you. Do you kind of get where I'm going with this? Here's the issues with the kids being in front of plastic all the time and not in front of people. When you offer them any kind of adversity, are we saying all kids? No. But when you offer them any type of adversity in the shape of a human being standing in front of them, they don't know what to do. We haven't developed those skill sets because it hasn't happened. No more go play outside. I was an only child. I played with butterflies. I don't know what the hell I played with. But kids nowadays have virtual reality friendships. And it takes them out of the social setting. And when they're getting talked to in a manner that they don't appreciate, they don't know how to react to it. This could be, it could go on and on and on. And the doctor would have so much more insight. But I really feel like, hey, we got to get those kids away from the screens and get them in front of other kids so they can interact. So, let me move on here. Information gathering, same idea. Now we have Siri and Alexis, or Alexa, not Alexis. And back then we had to go to the library. Remember that? Remember that? You would say to your parents, hey, what's this? And they'd be like, go look it up. That's just another code word for I don't know. And I either had to go upstairs and look at the big Encyclopedia Britannica shelf. Anybody have one of those? Yeah, my father was a cop too, and they got them out of dumpsters. I don't know. It's like we got new ones every year. They're expensive. And I not only had to know kind of what I wanted to know, but sort of how to spell it, or at least where to start, right? And you had to find it, look it up, and see, you're critically thinking your way towards a solution. Nowadays, kids are like, where's this? And it goes, this is here. We're skipping a whole chunk of brain development there. And then we're saying, God, my kid is brilliant. But he made a boneheaded mistake. I hope bonehead is not offensive. I may take that out of life. So, it's just like it is. All I really need to know, I learned it from Google, right? There's so much information out there, and if it's not used wisely, it can be an issue. We're going to skip through some of this. Kids are the same. The way they gather information is different. So we all remember this: hormones, clicks, bullying, emotions, sex, mood swings, mean girls. I wasn't the mean girl. I know a bunch of them, right? All this stuff, none of it has changed. We just called it different things back then. So, our kids have changed. Have you talked to your kids about their social media use? How many of, and we're not going to go like, how many have sat down with their kids and said, hey, what's your favorite social media site? Honest Merton. Come on, Merton. Couple people. Okay? How many of you in this room, it wasn't fair for me to ask that because your kids are either too young or they don't have phones? I am so desperate to know what you're doing. You're like the court reporter guy. You're awesome. Okay. So, here's the deal. Talk to them about it. Ask them about it. Last time I did this presentation, somebody's like, hey, how do you Snapchat? I said, I don't know. I'm not 13? I don't know. How do you use Instagram? Clueless. I'm still the old-fashioned Facebooker sometimes. Right? Here's what my suggestion would be to you. If your kids are using some sort of app, and you're looking at it and you're like, I think there's secret things, and I don't know how to do it, go to YouTube and look it up. It's almost like, have you ever written it, this is going to be far-fetched, but it's getting late. Have you ever written on a dry erase board with a permanent marker? Yeah? How many have done that? To a brand new dry erase, like, hey, Mom, permanent marker removes permanent marker, right? Let's use technology to fix the technology problem. Was that too much of a stretch? My first time with that one. Watch some YouTube videos. There's always some kid out there that is a little bit narcissistic, and by a little bit I mean he's so damn proud of himself that he's figured out so many different ways to do this, that, and the other thing, and get around their parents. Just Google it. That's the title. How to screw around with your parents so they don't find out what you're actually doing on Snapchat. Click. Watch the video. Does that mean your kid is not still going to be one step ahead of you? They probably are. But at least you're keeping up. Okay? And you have to do the research. You've got to figure out what they're into to be able to be mindful about how you're going to supervise that. Most commonly used sites by teens nowadays: Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram. They're videotaping this, and we were both like, I don't want to. And Dr. Royster's like, well, it's not going to be like on YouTube, is it? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the vehicle to get through there, right? So, look, you can do any, I converted my new range from natural gas to LP. All by myself. YouTube videos, so look it up. You can learn everything. All right, texting is the most common way parents quickly get in touch with their kids. How many of you in the room, just show of hands, and I want you all to look around, how many of you have kids in school that bring a cell phone to school with them? And there's no shame in this game, so that's about half, I would say. How many of you in the room now, your kids have a cell phone, but you forbid them to bring it to school? Not as many, so 2 or 3. It's kind of it's a pro and con, isn't it? Okay, coming from a law enforcement background, if my kid's in school and they need to get a hold of me, I want them to have a phone. Okay? And you're almost like it's a two-sided thing because, yeah, but I want to make sure that you just keep your phone in your backpack and only use it at lunch like you're supposed to at the Merton School District, right? But damn it, I want you to have that phone because I want instant communication with me. So that's something that you're going to have to sit down with as a family and set out some rules, right? So, most parents check their teens' social media and online use. Okay? So most parents do that. How often they do that is going to be up to you. I say, honestly, the more often the better. Is it their phone? No. That's your phone. And make sure you buy them that flip phone that only has like, and then that, introduce them to T9. You remember that? Did you see the new commercial now? I don't remember what it's for, but it's like a parent group that's all turning into their parents, or the adults. And the guy goes, why would I get a new phone? This one's never okay, right? He's the same guy wearing sandals with his socks. Mothers are more likely than fathers to talk to their teens about internet usage. Why do you think that is? Somebody offer up an opinion there. How many say, that's BS? What do you think?
I think it's true.
How come?
I think women tend to be more communicative, and they're more emotional based. So I think kids are more comfortable talking, most kids, not all, are more comfortable talking to their moms.
Anybody else have an opinion on that?
Persistence. My wife is way more persistent.
Right. So persistence, right? How many, hey, men in the crowd, how many of you guys get together with your men friends and you go have lunch and coffee on Tuesdays at 1? Mr. Circle. Right? And then he shuts off his GPS tracker his wife has on him. Women are more likely to get together and talk, right? Share experiences. And then all of a sudden we kind of process it and go, oh no, it better not be my kid, right? So then we tend to talk more. So women are more likely than men to talk to their teens. That was for you guys, men. Talk to your kids. Hey, when's the last time mom talked to you about this stuff? Bring up the conversation. What do you think of this one? Higher income parents tend to talk less with their teen about online behavior. This one got a rise out of Parents United. I liked it. It's fun. What do you think? How come? What do you think? I'll let that sit a sec.
They work more.
Yeah.
Okay, so not as available. They work more. They're out of the house more. Okay. Any other opinions?
They're more comfortable themselves with online behaviors.
Okay, so the parents themselves may be more comfortable. What do you think?
Mine's not going to be like.
Uh-oh.
So when I was in high school, I went to a private school, and when there was problems, the families that had the most income would buy out some of those problems. So my thought is higher income means they don't worry about the problems as much because they think there's easier solutions to them.
Okay. How many just automatically hate her right now? Just kidding. That's an interesting perspective. I didn't hear that one. So they're more consequence-based and we can handle it. Okay? What else? Don't be shy, Merton. As I was following my Google Maps and it kept saying Hartford, I'm like, come on, I don't know where I am.
I wonder if it could be a little bit of like, oh well, I've raised my kids to be good kids. Like I've always been paying attention, and now they know what they're doing. Kind of disassociation.
What do you think?
A little bit of not wanting to be a hypocrite. You wind up using your phone for work, so you're doing that at 7 o'clock, answering emails and texts. Well, you know they're doing the same thing, and you don't want to. It's okay for me to do it, but not for you.
Do as I say, not as I do type thing, right? What about when Dr. Royster brought that up, that we model the behavior that we expect from our kids, right? And then it's, you know, when mom is texting at the stop sign and the kids are like, right? So here's the deal. True story. I married into a family that has a chunk of the family that has a lot of money. And it's not us. We just go there for holidays and I look around at all the finishes. It is. It's always like, Stacy, dinner. I'm like, I'm at the basketball hoop. It's just a true story. It's a really cool house. I called her and I said, hey, what do you think of this? And she said, oh, hell yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? Because she represents that higher income family. And all of her friends, you know, you're only as smart and as rich as your 5 closest friends. So her 12 closest friends are richer than her, and they get together, and she said, my friends give their kids a hell of a lot of attributes. They link their success in school to their character. They link their friend group and the way that they dress and carry themselves and their politeness to their integrity. And yes, we do that a little bit, but they also think that's not my kid. And then something else she said, and we'll call her Angie. That's not her real name, but we'll call her Angie, and Angie said, a lot of my friends that have a lot of money or are very affluent think that that's just a city problem. Like Milwaukee kids get in trouble with their phones, not us. So it's almost like, we're skipping a huge opportunity. And if everybody hates me because of that statement, it's cool. My number's up on the thing. Cyberbully the hell out of me. So, this is interesting. And the reason I pointed out, if you're not talking to your kids, it doesn't really matter what your reasoning is, start talking to them. If your kids are hanging out with a social group of people that may be a little bit more affluent in money, chances are those parents aren't talking to their kids about responsible behavior with their phones. It's just the truth. So set that your kid aside and be like, hey, you got a great group of friends and they do like really fun stuff and that house is really cool, but have they ever done this, that, or the other thing? I find that the easiest way to talk to a kid is to bring up somebody else's behavior. Right? Have you ever known one of your friends to do A, B, or C? It's surprising how honest your kid will be with you if they think you're not focused on them. Right? They snitch. That's just what happens. Okay? Kids snitch on other kids. Right? It's a great door opener to ask about behaviors. Here's one that it's a little startling. Most teens sext. Everybody know what sexting is? Okay, good, because I don't want to talk about it. 54% of surveyed college kids confirm that they sent or received either sexually explicit or inappropriate photos. Here's what I want you to do, 54%. That means look left, do it with me. Look left, look right. If it ain't one of their kids, it's you. Right? It's your kid. And these are kids that have got, like, they pulled away from that opportunity to be convicted, right? So now we can be totally honest. It's like when you call your parents and you're like, that was actually me that drove the car through the fence. And now you're 48 years old and you're like, I can't do anything anymore. So these kids are being honest. That 1 out of 2 of them have done it. There's about 60 people in this room. The odds are, if your kid's of a certain age, we're not talking about the 2nd or the 3rd grader, but anticipating certain behavior, because we know kids have not changed. The way they communicate and get information has changed. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. My presentation is not about how do you keep your kids safe from predators. We know that's been done. My presentation is about how do you keep your kid away from predatorial type behaviors. In other words, your kid gets involved in something, has possession of something, that even if they had zero intent of doing anything wrong, it can be a criminal act. It's a very serious thing. Often with legislation and laws, it takes a bit for it to catch up with current times. How many of you growing up had a drone ordinance? How many of you laying in the sun when you were 14 looked up and saw a little mini helicopter over? There was no legislation because that didn't exist yet. You know where I'm coming from with this? So the laws that are out there that cover certain behaviors have not caught up with the technology and with the spirit. Most laws are put in the book, and I would say all laws are put in the book because there's a spirit around it. I want you to stop at the stoplight because the spirit is we don't want you to collide with anyone else, right? So the spirit of certain laws protects society from certain things. And now when kids start doing these things, and they're just being kids like we were, but they have all this technology at their disposal, it can fall into a criminal behavior. So let's talk about a couple of these. I'm going to give you a little case study here. There once was a guy named Steve. He had a 14-year-old daughter. We'll do this quickly. He's 40, he's married, he's got 2 kids, college degrees, both mother and father, middle-class income, highly involved in church and community. They have a 14-year-old girl. She's got a 3.7 grade point average. But nowadays, I hear you can get like a 4.8 grade point average. I don't understand how that is. You're more perfect than perfect. She's on a dance team. A couple of times a month, they go to competitions, and at least 12 to 15 hours a week, which is a part-time job, she's doing dance practice. No prior discipline issues at school. She's got a 17-year-old older brother. Here's what happens. She's at home and she receives a text message from a friend, a girl, and a photo attached to it. And the photo is of a 14-year-old girl with her breasts exposed. And the text says, "Can you believe that blank sent this? It's going all around school." Okay? Now, we're all kind of thinking like, ooh, that's crappy, right? But nothing like too out of the ordinary. You get texts all the time. What do? You think to yourself, ooh, I don't know if I should open it. Right? You open the darn text. She opens the text. She sends it to a friend. "I can't believe I just got this. Do you think it's true?" Send. Fast forward. Steve gets a phone call. "We took your daughter into custody. We confiscated the phone, and now she's being investigated for part of a felony operation of distribution of child pornography." This is when we should all cringe. Right? Long story short, the district attorney took about 6 months to figure out what the hell he was going to do with the 14 kids that were involved in this. Ultimately, a few of them got disorderly conduct tickets. The parents paid them. In the meantime, the emotional distress on the family. The phone is gone. It's like an $800 phone. Steve's daughter, who's on the dance team, was continually harassed at school. Her friends were mad because she shared the photo. Somebody was snitching on somebody. You see how this all goes? Nothing different than what happened when we were young kids. There were cliques, right? There was behavior that wasn't socially acceptable. It was all that kind of stuff. Her grades started to slip. She wanted to quit the dance team. She was crying all the time, secluded in her room. She gained weight. It was horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. Who wants to take a guess at what Steve does for a living? My Parents United folks, you are exempt. Who said cop? Yeah, Steve's a police officer. Steve is a guy that I worked with that actually got me more interested in this topic. And I sat next to him. He was another instructor. And here was a grown man in tears, feeling so horrible for his daughter that she had to go through this. And I said, "Did you ever talk to her about this?" He's like, "No, I didn't think I had to." Ooh. Is it Steve's fault for not talking to her? Ignorance is bliss, right? He put a lot of attributions on her. Hey, she's a good kid. And she is a great kid. She's pulled out on the other end. She's great. Okay? She's going to college. She's a great kid. She learned a lesson from this. How many would think, yeah? Yeah. Steve and his wife, every week, they have Tech-Free Tuesdays, which is a Common Sense Media thing. Tech-Free Tuesdays, and they have We're going to Talk About It Tuesdays as well. She has an older brother. Now he's opted out of being a juvenile. But they talk to her consistently every week. And this has happened a very long time ago. Why are they doing it? Consistent follow-up. How many times have you done something stupid and then you did it again? Hello. Every single day I struggle in my head. I'm like, yeah, but the last time, right? You've got to make sure that we're saying, hey, hon, do you remember what happened last time? I want to set up a strategy. How do we now make sure that this doesn't happen again? A little bit later, we're going to talk about some strategies, and then I want your input. What have you done as a family to be able to say, hey, I'm a safe space? I just remember when I was younger, my mother used to say, if you ever get in trouble or you don't go out and drink, and if you need a, you come and you call me and no questions asked. Anybody ever hear that from their parents? Right? And it was some form of that. And there was this desperate free, right? Plea, not free or flee. Like they were just so desperate that you believed them this one time that there'd be no consequence, right? Let me ask, have you ever called? Who said, yeah, you're a good girl, man. You called. And how long were you grounded? But you took advantage. Okay. You're stand over there. Most of us never called, right? We just never did. Right? Things with this, when we're talking about cyberbullying, when we're talking about inappropriate use of phones, which we're going to get more into it, you've got to give your kid a roadmap. If Steve could have done it all over again, he would have had a talk with his daughter a long time ago and said, if you ever received anything that was in these categories, and think up categories you don't even think exist. Say them out of your mouth. Write them down on a piece of paper. If it's this, or anything that looks like any of these things, I need you to come to me first and let me deal with it because I'm the adult and I'll figure out how to handle this situation. When we put all the onus on a kid that does not have the ability to separate, hey, but I want to be popular with, but my mom and dad would probably get pissed, right? We're putting them in an unfair situation. Write out that roadmap. Be specific and say the words. Just don't think, well, I got a good kid, they're never going to take their shirt off and take a picture. Okay? You have to be specific. So, child pornography and selfies. Any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct involving a minor. Here's how this plays out in very plain language. If your kid is under the age of 18 and they produce or knowingly possess anything that's explicit and sexual in nature, that's child pornography, regardless of how old they are at the time of possession. So if a 13-year-old sends a 13-year-old body part pictures, that's possession of child pornography. Now, here's the deal. That's a felony. There's no other category for it to fit into with Wisconsin state statutes. They're working on it, but you know how long that takes, right? They're working on it. So when it comes to light, in other words, when the mandated reporters in the school systems or the parents discover these images, they call the police. That police officer's hands are tied. They absolutely have to go forward and investigate it exactly what the letter of the law says. Does that make sense? They got no other route. You can't just say, oh, you know what, I pulled you over, Mark, for speeding, that's the second time, now knock it off. There's no discretion in there. That gets these kids in a jam. And truly, most of it is adolescent behavior. Am I saying, oh, child porn is okay in some circumstance? No, I did not say that. Stacy didn't say that. Wait, let me get in front of the camera. No. Okay? All right. We're going to buzz through these. There's some recent cases in all over the U.S. 16-year-old boy is charged with child pornography. Here's the difference in this one. There's a internet site called like Lockbox. And this kid started a text your girlfriend for a pic. That's what the verbiage is. Hey, send me a pic. In kid language, that's send me some sort of body part picture. And what he decided to do is kind of stockpile this stuff and see how many points you can get. So, boys and girls alike, we're getting points to send in these pictures. When it was finally investigated to its fullest, there was like 4,000 images of child pornographic stuff. That kid, does he need to go and spend some time in a detention center and think about it? Yeah, he absolutely does. When you're talking about some of these instances that are happening to kids where, and it's hard for me to put the word harmless with pornography, but if something happens, they're not going to weigh it differently. Does that make sense? Your child or your friend's kid, let's talk about them, it's easier. That neighbor kid of yours will get detained by the police. They will see a district attorney. A district attorney will probably sit there for a long time, unless it's something like this, and decide what kind of charges should be issued. But there's a lot of things to go through, and it's not just the legal system of it, it's all the ramifications of what happens at school. Because everybody's so concerned with what group they fit into. We're old enough now that, you know, I think our prayers would be answered if we're like, can you leave me alone for 3 days? Right? But our kids aren't like that. And they go through a lot of heartache when these things happen. Same idea here. 8 kids ranging from age 13 to 17. Taking photos and sharing it. This one's closer to home. This is coming, they made a little video say don't go to school today. They have masks on and they have like toy guns, okay? There's so much power in the hands now with the technology that it's not, the answer is not necessarily take the technology away, but it's how do we properly use it? How do we sit down and have these conversations? There's a couple of strategies, and I'll go quick. If your kid has goals or dreams or aspirations to do something one day, you know that all college admission workers look at social media. Anybody that's worth a look on a piece of paper, they're going to cruise social media. And all you got to do is go to YouTube or Google it. And kids have had excellent grades, lots of extracurriculars, scholarship opportunities, and it's been ruined by some of the stuff they post on social media. I found it this way. If you can tell me that my behavior is going to stand in the way of me achieving something that's important to me, and you explain to me how, the chance of me doing it is less. Versus just, oh yeah, don't do it, right? But you have to have that conversation first. Whoever possesses or accesses in any way, this is why it's so vague here. If they access it in any way includes phone or clicker. Any undeveloped film, photograph, negative, motion picture, videotape, other recording of a child engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Some people have argued with me and said, well, a picture of a woman's breast or a child's breast is not sexually explicit content. I don't know what else it could be. And there's that struggle. So it's not like I'm going to send you a picture of a mole on my arm and go, what do you think, oddly shaped? Okay? That's got purpose, but when a 13-year-old exposes herself or a 14-year-old exposes himself and sends that picture, there is no other way to interpret the content. Okay? You kids got to understand that. Causing a child to view or listen to sexual activity. This is another state statute in there. If you didn't produce it, but yes, not you, but if say Amy produces it and sends it to Billy, and Billy opens it, Amy has now just caused Billy to view sexual content. That makes sense? And this is, once again, this is all, if you just Google Wisconsin state statutes, make sure you're Googling Wisconsin state statutes. This is usually where I inject some sort of like bad humor of different states viewing things differently, which I won't do. So make sure you're on the Wisconsin site with this. And you can just type in child pornography. And you can read it verbatim. This is exactly what the police use, exactly what the district attorneys use when they make the determination to go forward with charging. In 2009, DPI, Department of Public Instruction, I believe, right? DPI? I'm the cop who was learning DPI. Made a policy on bullying. I know it's mandated that when your kid starts any school, you are made aware of that policy. I would encourage you to look it up. Some of the wording's a little bit different, but they're usually pretty much the same. You shouldn't act in a way, ooh, it's got a thing. I was like, what is that? What I wanted to read, and I was up in the back, and I just taught the MATC kids last week, and we talked about harassment. I prefer to call cyberbullying, when I talk to kids, I like to call it harassment. Okay? Bullying, in some kids' eyes, it is going to be the hardest thing to explain. Some of the kids think, I'm not getting bullied, because that's going to be a sign of weakness. For a young man or a young woman to admit, I'm getting bullied, is asking them to admit to you that they're weak. I know it's a weird perspective on it, but I prefer to call it harassment. Is anybody harassing you? Is anybody saying things that aren't kind, that are making you think differently about yourself or your friend group? In the Wisconsin state statutes, and this is as close as I could get to making it cloud up there, and it didn't. Whoever engages in a course of conduct or repeatedly commits acts which harass or intimidate the person which serve no legitimate purpose. That's the definition of harassment. Okay? That's a convictable offense. If it's serious enough, and your kid comes to you and goes, look at all these texts, or look at all this, and you think, hey, you know what? There is absolutely no legitimate purpose for this, and the intention is to harass or intimidate my kid, this is harassment. And here's the part of the school system that I want to tell you about. Go to your school system and say, hey, listen, this is happening to my kid. They may not have said that they were being bullied, because bully implies big kid picking on little kid, doesn't it? Okay? you'll shoot your eye out. Who's the one, what's that movie with the guy, I can't get up. So I call it harassment. Is your kid being harassed? Kind of the same idea. This is a handout. You can look online and get it. It's like 32 pages. There's some great information. I'm going to quickly go through some of this. These are questions that I get often asked. We already talked about sexting, but it's in here that you cannot do it. Safe Schools is a Wisconsin program. So, sexting, it's in there. Last paragraph, and I have a pointer now, check it. We're going to start over, because that's super cool. Consequently, when a school official has reasonable suspicion that sexting might be occurring, they should immediately solicit assistance from law enforcement. Just as the police officer and the district attorney is bound by language, right? So is schools. So when these guys sitting up in the back are like, oh crap, what do I do? They go, hey, immediately solicit assistance from law enforcement. 911. I think I call 911, probably not, but you know where I'm going with that, right? And then where does law enforcement, their mindset is wrapped in language too. So, best thing we can do, talk to the kids, try to prevent this. Try to get them to be really good digital citizens. Let's be kind. If you have nothing good to say, don't say it at all these old-fashioned things, right? But you gotta be specific. Because if it rises to a level of a criminal offense, the school's going to do something, the parents are going to do something, and ultimately, hey, even if they don't convict your kid of something, that kid's going to go through some emotional trauma from that, and life will change, even temporarily. So are police school liaison officers considered police or school officials? What do you think?
Police.
Yeah, they're police officers. I'm not sure if Merton School District has a good. Most schools do. So if there's a police officer in the school, they're acting as law enforcement on behalf of their jurisdiction. What does the school official need to make a search of a student? And these are just the cut and dry, because I get these questions all the time. A reasonable suspicion that the student might be engaging in illegal activity. How big, how broad is illegal activity? Hey, I was a cop in Milwaukee. Anything you do is illegal activity. Figure it out. At one point, you spit your gum out of your car. We're going to talk about it. So, reasonable suspicion just means this. I have a suspicion that's pretty darn reasonable. And that could be something as simple. I can give you, yeah, like, you don't want the real definition, like the law enforcement definition is like, is, has, or about to commit a crime. But for this practical purposes, and hopefully this doesn't bleed over into my recruit training, because they'd be like, because it's reasonable. Another kid comes up, the kid goes up to one of the teachers and says, I think Billy's got weed in his locker. That would never happen to Merton. Thank you for the obligatory laugh. So, Billy's got weed in his locker. That's reasonable suspicion. Okay? So, here's what happens, the pendulum kind of turns. We want our kids to be safe in school. Any little rumor that something is unsafe, that school administrator will go, absolutely, we will search. And there's not one hand that will go up in this room that disagrees with that. In the name of safety, remember I said that the law always has spirit attached to it? The spirit of this is safety. And I don't know that many parents that would be like, nope, don't search my child. Oh, goodbye. Bye-bye. Calling the police, we're going to search you on the way out. You're like, wait till they just get off school grounds and be like, whoop, whoop. Would never do that. Does a school official need to worry about the Miranda warning before questioning a student about possible criminal activity? What do you think? Remember all that, you have the right to remain silent, anything you do or say? School officials are not law enforcement officers. School officials do not work for the government. So school officials do not have to Mirandize your child before they ask them questions. That make sense? Mm-hmm. A lot of parents come up like, they didn't even read my kid their rights. Well, they don't need to. Okay? What I would do, though, is have a conversation with your kids when they're at that appropriate age and say, hey, if you think you're in trouble or you are being accused of something in school and somebody sits down to talk to you, and my administrator's in the back, shut your ears. Bow tie Tuesday, are you still here? Real quick, hands up, over ears. Tell them to respectfully say, I want to talk to my mom, or I just don't feel like talking right now. Okay? Because they can ask them whatever they want to ask them. Here's the problem that Steve had with the 14-year-old daughter. Her principal she really liked. She's a great lady. And she sat down with her, and the tears started to flow on both sides, and the daughter admitted absolutely everything. That goes into evidence. And then when West Dallas Police Department took 6 months to figure out what to do, that was part of evidence. That make sense? Okay, so just make sure your kid is educated on what they can and can't do. And I know that's a tough one. That's such a, because you don't want to tell your kid, you know, I defy authority. But they should just know, hey, listen, when you think, oh man, this is not a good situation, give them a strategy. Hey, respectfully teach, can I have my phone back so I can call my mom? Mom will talk more, right? But usually dad shows up. Is there any obligation for the police to contact the parents before interviewing a student on student grounds? Nope. They do not have to contact you. If they interview your kid on student grounds, they do not have to contact you first. Best practice, and not having to do something versus best practice is let the parents know. Because we got to maintain a good relationship, and it's just best practice. I mean, and now I feel like I'm talking to my cops. Like, don't be a... It's either a two-syllable word or a one-syllable, but it's usually whoever's in the crowd. So, no, they don't have to, okay? If a school official is searching a locker, can they search any item found in the locker regardless of ownership? What do you think? The spirit of this rule is safety. So yeah, absolutely, right? That's like I used to arrest people on the street in Milwaukee, and I used to do, what's in your pocket? Oh, and I'd pull out all the weed, and they'd be like, these aren't my pants. Not kidding. Always. It's always in the front right pant pocket, and it's never their pants. I don't think I've ever woken up with someone else's pants. So, when both school officials and police join in a stop or a search, whose rules control? What do you think? I think the answer is, it depends. More gray area. For example, if the school asks the police for assistance, then the school's less stringent Fourth Amendment rules would control. So basically, if the school initiates an investigation, the school is not bound as tightly to the Fourth Amendment. Quick little tutorial. Fourth Amendment guards against unlawful search or seizure. Okay? So that's all of our civilian rights here. But the school, because the spirit of what they're doing is safety, and they're not government officials, their rules are a little bit less stringent. If the police come in and start an investigation, then the Fourth Amendment applies. Make sense? Hopefully you'll never need to know that again. We're going to skip that. What can you do? Talk to them, talk to them, talk to them. Give them a plan. Set up a buddy system. They get some sort of text from somebody and they don't know what to do. If they have a buddy, somebody that they trust, their girlfriend or their guy friend, that they just know through thick and thin we're going to be friends forever, and they don't want to come to you first and they want to consult their peer, tell them, don't share the photo, call your peer and tell them to come over. And say, hey, we got to do this together, I got to tell my parents. Ultimately, they need to tell their parents. Ultimately, they have to tell the school. Ultimately, they need to go to an adult with the hot potato. Make sense? That's a hot potato. They are not old enough to deal with that, and by law, they are not old enough to possess it, or view it, or have it. Okay? We've got to have that conversation with them. Monitor their phone use. I agree 100%, don't have that stuff in the bedroom. Have one central charging station in your house. All the phones go there at whatever time. Check their phones. Ask for their passwords. If they change the password on them, it's my phone. Or you change their password. Here you go, buddy. Okay, neat. Let's play that game. Okay? Ultimately, it's your responsibility. Anything that comes down, it's your responsibility. You've got to educate them. Tell them what's good, tell them what's bad. Be specific, use the words. These are monitoring apps, and these things, you can go on YouTube, Google it, figure it out. I have not personally used any of these. We'll skip through that quick. Well, come on up, Miss Doctor. And we're going a little bit over. I apologize for the delay. Any questions for either one of us? And I'm sorry that was so quick. Yes, sir.
So if your kid brings you a hot potato, what are you supposed to do with it?
Like, you know they got it.
It's against the law to possess
It's
it.
against the law to possess
But
it.
someone sent it to you, so what?
Here's the deal. I'm going to be very honest with you, okay? He brings you, or he or she brings you the hot potato. Where did he get it from? Is there another parent you could reach out to? Okay? Because here's the deal. And I'm not, this is a kind of, use your discretion. Do you want to pick up and call 911? Probably not. What I would probably do with that, take that phone, immediately figure out where it came from. If you have a relationship with that parent, reach out to that parent. And now you have a buddy system. What are we going to do with this? How far did this get? Did it happen on school grounds? Do you have a good relationship with the teachers, the administrators in the school? Hey, is this something that's going on that this is just scratching the surface? This is what my kid got. Because you're looking at it and you know that your kid is a victim now of this. Okay? If your kid is the perpetrator of it, it may be a different story. You're going to have a conversation. But am I saying immediately notify the police? It depends. Technically, do you want it to get that far where the police get involved?
What if your child receives something, opens it and deletes it?
And never tells you about it?
So it doesn't tell anyone, but then they investigate it somehow.
Right. Here's the deal. The question was, what if your kid receives something, opens it, and deletes it, and doesn't tell anyone? Right? Do you think that happens more often than we know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem comes in when somebody does discover, and that chain is always there. And then don't be surprised if the police knock on the door, come to school and talk to your kid. Hey, did you ever get a photograph? That's the time that I need your kids to understand that you don't have to answer the questions. Just say, you know, find a way, with all due respect, Mr. So-and-so or whatever, I would really just like to talk to my parents before I say anything. That's okay. Okay? Teach them to do that. And ultimately, yeah, they can confiscate your phone. If they have probable cause to believe that there is a photograph or an image on that phone, even though your kid said I deleted it, they can still confiscate that phone as evidence. And that can just be a long battle.
Could your child be charged with something if they've received it and deleted it, they don't possess it, they didn't distribute it? Could they still get charged?
It'll be up to a district attorney. Here's what's happening. Like I said earlier, these laws are being looked at. And they're trying to find a different way to approach it because all of this child pornography stuff is a felony. Felony is a big deal. So now we're looking at it and going, hey, really? It's a picture. My kid deleted it. Really? We're going to have them be a registered sex offender the rest of their lives for this kind of behavior? Right? So could they get in trouble? Here's what usually would happen if it's a big enough thing. Your kid could be a good witness. And then that brings in a whole nother thing, right? Because now you're pitting kids against each other. Because your daughter's not going to lie. No, I did not receive it. And there's a whole chainmail on there. Yeah, you did. So now the prosecutors may say, okay, I've got 30 witnesses. Here's the perpetrator and here's the first kid that sent it. Does that make sense? What else we got? But don't worry, you guys have great kids. It's not your kids. We're talking about someone else.
Would you say that child pornography is one of the main things that children get into as far as on their phone, or are there different types of things that we as parents should be on the lookout for?
What do you think? You want to?
I think that sexting and the pictures are pretty intense, but I have seen some less reputable research. So we're talking about like parenting blogs sort of things. I recently read one yesterday that was quite frightening. A teacher had asked her students, what are the things that you do online that we don't know about, that your parents don't know about? And kids were writing things like, I can buy bombs, I can buy drugs, I can find all of these things. So I do think, and I think my experience with kind of older kids is that there certainly is some things happening around illicit activities that we should be watchful of. I don't know how you do that. I don't know where you go to buy drugs online.
Just ask me on the.
I bet you do. But I would say some of that is happening as well.
Yeah. I just think it's oversight too. Random spot checks, you know? It's like I was a bad example because I'm a good kid, but you know, we had random drug testing throughout my entire career in Milwaukee Police Department. That kept a whole lot of people employed. You know, and it's just,
problem. Yeah.
Well,
If you don't know when you're gonna get it.
right. Every time I came back from a vacation someplace on a beach, all of a sudden I was here. Drug test. I'm like, really? Okay, I can't go to Jamaica without getting drug tested. No, it's not. But here's the deal. If you play, hey, that phone is mine and I'm allowing you to use it. I'm setting down these guidelines and these rules, and we're going to sit down and have this icky conversation about all these words you don't like to hear. And we're going to write down the things that I need you to immediately notify me of when you become aware of them. Got it? And I'm going to randomly check your texts. I'm going to check your photos. I'm going to look at your videos. I'm going to look at your cookies, your history, your whole 9 yards. If you don't know how to do any of that, go to YouTube and look it up. And just have that. And it's not you saying, I don't trust you. It's you saying, I want to make sure that you have a good, bright future with all the opportunities. Because there's so many things out there that at this age, you shouldn't even be able to, it's not even fair to have you handle it, so I need to help you out. And that's me as a parent helping you out, making these decisions to make sure that you're going to take the right path. I had a mom once say to me, my daughter knows that I trust her and it's her trust to lose. I said, where's the baseline? Where'd you start? Well, she just knows. I'm like, oh, ha, ha. No. And am I saying don't trust your kids? It's kind of. But it's the development of it. So. But you have great kids. It's Merton. Go.
My oldest child is in 4K right now, so I can't even fathom what I However, when do you recommend starting to introduce or provide a cell phone PDA to your child?
My educated friend over here.
Yeah, so AAP recommends no screen time under 2 at all. Some say 18 months. Then you can introduce some high quality screen time. The more that you are engaging with your child around it, the better off you are. Always explicit about some of these basic rules that you're trying to kind of help them grow into, right? There is a big movement in technology companies around no smartphones before 8 or before 14 years old. Little side note, Bill Gates broke his own rule and gave his kid a smartphone like way before that. So, you know, it's not a perfect science, but there's a lot of people saying wait as long as you can, ideally.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, because I mean everybody else will have one or whatever, but I'm right there with you. I have little ones, and I was like, sexting, no! I know. She's a baby. Yes, go ahead.
What are the laws here about vaping? Possession, school, what if kids caught with vaping paraphernalia? How does Wisconsin?
Oh, like vape pen?
Oh, that's just weird.
No, you can't be weird.
Right now with vaping, it's the same as tobacco laws. If you're under the age of 18, you're in possession, then it's police involvement. Arrowhead will tell you that. Any of the feeder schools will tell you that. When you were talking about buying illicit stuff, if you have Amazon Prime or any of those things, and you buy a whole bunch of stuff, please check what you're buying, because what we heard at Arrowhead was there's kids that are buying all those supplies right through Amazon or any place else, and they're not having them delivered to your house, they're having them delivered to school. Because they find out when the deliveries are being made by FedEx or UPS, and the kids are smart enough to go on a bathroom break to pick up their package on their way. I'm not kidding. You can't make this stuff up. So you really need to, if you're really into the online buying stuff, make sure you're keeping an eye on what it is that's being purchased. Because if they're using a device that you have and their Amazon Prime account is set up on it, they could be buying stuff that you don't even know about. Sorry, I had to put the damper on.
Oh, good. Yes, sir.
What about the issue with, Snapchat, which supposedly goes away, but we know it doesn't really go away because it's out there forever. How do you deal with that? I mean,
I think it supposedly disappears, but after, it used to be like, Is it 24 hours?
No, you set the timer.
Oh, you do?
You can set it to like, they can replay it over and over, or it can be 2 seconds, lots of like shorter.
And you get a notification if it's screenshot, so if somebody takes a picture of the screen with your picture on it, you know it was taken.
Okay.
You know, and then you're like,
What do you
well,
do?
shit, they have the phone.
Right. Here's it, I mean,
There's so many ways. Is there a smart talk? You gotta go back to the old days and just get tough with your kids.
yeah. And ultimately, the goal is to prevent it from happening to begin with. But oftentimes, I mean, we don't know what we don't know, and that's so much more true for the young brain. They don't know what they're doing is wrong. I interviewed a whole bunch of kids that were 12 and 13 years old, and they said, it's my parents' phone, but it's locked with my password, therefore it's my private stuff. No, it's really not your private stuff. And they think because it's got a password on it, that what they say and what they do on their phone is their private stuff. And it's like, ah. Then I talked to a 17-year-old that was just, I don't know, this kid was, whatever. He's doing this sex thing with his girlfriend. He goes, well, I deleted it. It's gone forever. I'm like, what? He had like a 4.6 grade point average. Here's the deal. It can be as simple as this. It's never gone. It's never gone, because a lot of these kids don't understand, and some of them do. If you do a screenshot, or I take a picture of a picture, that's most of us in the Generation X and older. It's like, how do you make the picture on your phone? You take a picture of a picture, right? That's the old-fashioned screenshot. It's a photo of a photograph. But at least tell the kids, hey, this is what somebody can do to your image. You know, are you thinking of it that way? What are the consequences of it? You know, have them count to 3. The little 3-second rule. It's like a drop of cookie. It's more of a 30-second rule. But if what I'm about to say or do, who is it going to affect? 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. How am I going to explain this in the light of day? What if somebody finds out what I just did? Just ask yourself those questions. We've done that because based on experience of screwing up over and over. So.
Yeah, I think it's about responsible use ahead of time. I think that's the conversation to have, especially about Snapchat. Like, do you know that it doesn't really disappear? And about the cloud.
I think the hardest part is some of the kids just don't care. So what?
Right.
How do you respond to that?
Let's hope it's not your kid. I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. I've often found that it's when you get caught doing something, it's not the first time you've done it, right?
Ideally.
Ideally, right? And